Okay, we're right on the money. I'm John McNamara. Welcome to the Hursley IIC Innovation Centre Cognitive Discussion. I say I'm John. I work in the IBM Hursley Labs. This is Adam, Stef, two awesome SMEs who also work in the IBM Hursley Innovation Centre. Now, what we do here is we help business partners to innovate, and that can range from a number of things, right from brainstorming sessions to help our partners solidify their ideas, provide them with technical enablement and IBM products, all the way to technical mentorship and helping them to implement their applications with IBM technology. And one of the reasons we thought we'd like to do this is because we were getting a lot more interest from partners around Watson. And we thought that doing an open live broadcast where people can tweet in and ask us questions would be a pretty cool thing to do. Now, Adam, I know you particularly have been working very recently with partners on Watson. Can you give us an overview of your take on cognitive and why it's important to our partners?
Yeah, that's a good question to get started with. So a lot of people think that cognitive is basically the same as artificial intelligence, which is something that's been around for ages, since maybe like the 50s or the 60s, and it's really captured the imagination of people and the media and featured in films and books and stuff like that. But you could argue that the progress of AI has been kind of slow, really, which is why IBM have a slightly different definition for cognitive. So the definition for cognitive is a system that can learn at scale, it can reason with a purpose, and it can interact with humans in a natural way. So why do you need a system that can do that? Well, the answer is all about unstructured data. So as you may have heard, 80% of the data out there in the world today is unstructured, and the amount of it is growing as well. So unstructured data means basically anything written in free text. So that could be a report or a social media post or a letter or maybe like a review of a product on a website, for example. And all of that unstructured data could contain some very useful answers for a wide range of different areas, really. So everything from like health to government to business. But the problem is that traditional IT is very much geared up to working with structured data. So the kind of stuff which fits neatly into rows and columns of maybe a spreadsheet or a database. So it can't process all that unstructured data. And that's, of course, where a cognitive system comes in, because a cognitive system can process that vast quantity of unstructured data. And what it can do with it is it can provide recommendations and hypotheses from that data. And not only that, it can back it up with an explanation of why it came to that conclusion and a level of confidence about its recommendations. So, you can imagine that this is becoming increasingly important in the marketplace today, not only because it potentially has some business value, but also because it can benefit real people as well. So the idea is very much that you can use a cognitive system to augment the human's ability to process this vast amount of data and maybe act upon some of the challenges in our society today. So at IBM, cognitive is synonymous with a brand and also a division of our company now called Watson. So Stef, do you want to tell us the background of where we got to Watson?
Yeah, sure. Just before I do that, many of you might have remembered back in 1997, there was a chess championship, and we invented something called Deep Blue, and obviously we're competing against the real people, and we won that championship against Garry Kasparov at the time. And since then we found that the best combination of having a chess competition is with machines and people, not just one or the other. So then fast forward to 2011, we're into the Jeopardy quiz program, which some of you may know about. So the quiz program is on US TV, and the interesting thing about that is you are given the answer and you have to supply the question. So on the screen now you see there's Watson in there with the two people who were the experts in Jeopardy, the real people. Now we had no internet connection whatsoever available. We had to parse 200 million pages of information and at the same time be able to buzz against the real person. So it's all very, very fast. All this data had to be analysed, and we had to then supply the question to the quizmaster. So it took us 20 researchers, 3 years to develop that. And during the game, we weren't doing too well, but after a while, we accelerated our our answers, and we actually won the actual competition against the real people. Then moving on to 2014, we formed the IBM Watson Group. That's about 2,000 person group, and we invested £1 billion at that time. So we've moved on from just the question and answer facilities of Jeopardy, and now we've moved into splitting out those into other services. Now, in one example of Watson is in Beijing. We're monitoring all the pollution in the city, sensor data, traffic cameras, and then we're building up information to then close off certain parts of the city or reduce the traffic at particular times of the day. But Watson is being applied to banking, law, finance, many industries. So we're turning them into all these facilities into products. And John, I'm wondering whether you can just outline what we've been doing.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. So we've got an overall view of Watson. It breaks down to a number of different areas, and we're going to mention briefly 3 of them and then focus a bit deeply on the other 2. The first one to kick off with was the Watson Engagement Advisor, and it's a particular favourite of mine, and I suspect it might resonate with a few people on the end of the hangout. If you've ever phoned a call centre, you'll have probably come across the automated menu choices on your phone. And typically what will happen is you'll phone up, you'll be given 9 options, and you'll have to listen to all 9 to be sure that the option you choose is the right one, or if you do jump the gun and not listen, go for one earlier, go back again and re-listen. And very often it's only a very small amount of actual questions can be resolved with the automated queuing system. But what will typically happen to all those other people is that they will get to the first line person who will be having to respond to the question. By the time you get there, you're typically going to be a little bit angry and unhappy because you've fought your way through the system, explained everything, and then you speak to a person, and I've had happened to me, you've put in all your details for the past 10 minutes, and the first thing that happens is I say to you, who are you and what is it you want? And there's nothing more frustrating than that. And so you already started off with a human being, and you're already upset and unhappy. And the way that the problem that can often occur then is that this leads to very bad customer satisfaction. Long wait times makes you really angry. It makes you probably more emotional than you would be when you phone up with a problem. And this day and age, it can really damage your reputation online because people now don't tend to keep those kind of opinions themselves. They'll share it on Facebook or Twitter. And I've had it where, you complain about something and 10 people go, yeah, I've had the same experience as well. And it becomes a wall of unhappiness about your product. And that's something you're trying to avoid while trying to keep your call center effective and efficient. And one of the ways that Watson Engagement Advisor can help you is by providing something like a cognitive assistant. And you can train up the engagement advisor so that it understands the majority of the questions that people will be wanting answers to. And you can instill within it a dialogue so that rather than having an automated menu system, it will be like a real person they're talking to. Hello, provide a greeting, how can I help you? And we'll talk about balance, or we'll talk about a problem with the Wi-Fi, and they'll explore the number of options with the user on the end of the phone in an interactive way. And for those questions that can be dealt with, they're quite simple, it will respond quickly and easily and give good customer satisfaction. But the nice thing about the engagement advisor is it can use a lot of the Watson services, such as tone analyzer, to detect if someone's genuinely unhappy or genuinely upset, and they feel that maybe going through an automated route is probably not the right course, they need to be escalated to, say, a manager, for example. So in that way, a lot of the level 1 resource can be moved to level 2, provide more meaningful, fulfilling roles with real problems, rather than to have to answer the same question again and again and again. Now, the engagement advisor is available on mobile, on tablets, on all manner of devices. It has text-to-speech, speech-to-text, so it can converse with people who are phoning in, or it can even be used as a kind of a chatbot as well. And that can be a really effective way to provide good customer satisfaction, providing actually a fulfilling role to people who work in your organization too. The discovery advisor is particularly interesting. Now, it's got an awful lot of use cases around it, but perhaps one of the most interesting use cases is that around helping people research new solutions or solve problems. There are a number of challenges with human-only research, in that if you are a researcher or an expert in one particular field, let's say it's technology or an aspect of technology, as you know, nowadays those fields evolve at a fantastic rate, and it's really hard to keep up to speed with every single relevant piece of information that you would find that's pertinent to your field. But with the Discovery Advisor, it can be trained to analyze all the new piece of information, parse and understand them automatically, and present that to you, which is incredibly helpful. The other problem or challenge that researchers can have is that very often a research breakthrough doesn't come from just studying one siloed area of research. Very often it's an amalgamation of two or three that come together to provide that overall breakthrough. Now, if trying to parse and understand for a human being all the evolution and the new data that's coming out from one segment, it's going to be incredibly difficult to keep track on all the related fields as well. Now, here's another area that Discovery Advisor can help with, in that it can also parse and understand the textual and structured data, all the written articles and published papers that come out from the related fields too. Now, even as a human researcher, if you're able to parse all the information and you're able to understand all the related fields as well, it's still going to be a real challenge to try and spot the patterns between all the information for the different fields that lead you to a breakthrough. And the great thing about the Discovery Advisor is the fact that it can actually find those patterns and present them to you to show the correlations in the data, whether it be structured or unstructured, that will enable the researcher to go from that kind of eureka moment and see a pattern in that data, and then to push forward the research. And that's incredibly interesting. And not only is it happening in research, but I've read an article where there's a police force in the States that are applying Discovery Advisor to cold cases to see if there are any leads or any patterns that they may have missed, which is incredibly interesting. The last thing that I want to talk about was Watson Analytics. And here, I guess there's a theme, which is consumability of information. And Watson Analytics is no different, really. The main purpose behind it is provide the line of business user with easy access to data analysis tools, which would only previously be in the hands of data scientists. And one of the problems that we have today is that a line of business user may want to make their business more effective using the data that they have accumulated, but what they want is kind of abstracted because they need to get it to somebody else to parse that data and provide them with feedback. Now, what Watson Analytics does is it allows you to push in the data, that structured data. It will look at that structured data and say, hey, actually, there's a number of predictive analytics that I can apply to this and present them to you. So rather than you going into the tool having to have all of that knowledge about data science, the Watson Analytics can come to you and say, I've seen your data, I think that these 4 areas of analysis will be useful for you, let me present them to you. What do you think? And that way it makes the whole area of data science and applying the data to your business so much more consumable. So, Stef, can I ask you to talk to us about WEX?
Sure, thanks, John. So WEX, that's Watson Explorer. There's 2 versions of Watson Explorer. There's Enterprise and Advanced Edition. Enterprise is really the enterprise search. So on the slide now, you see the challenges that the Watson Explorer addresses. So the first row there, information access. There's just so much information that people have on the internet, in their own companies. No one person can take that information and analyze it. So Watson Enterprise Edition has the enterprise search capability. It can connect to all these systems. It comes out of the box. Things called connectors, which connect to your back-end systems, connect to the internet, websites, and so forth. And what the system does, it indexes the data. It's not a data warehousing system. It indexes the data and finds, it gets that data and brings it all together. You can have refresh intervals of that data. So if there's something that changes often, then you can have that refreshed more often than other bits of data. Security is also built into the system, as in if a particular back-end system only allows a certain person to log on, they can only get that data. You don't have to give them admin rights to get other bits of data. So all that information is brought together with the Enterprise Search Edition, and then you can present that to your end user. Now, building on something John had earlier on, it was like a help desk scenario where the data will be brought in from your different systems, and the help desk individual will have that data in front of them in something called a 360 view. So they have information about you, say about your insurance claims, about where you live and so forth. And that's all brought together with something called App Builder. App Builder glues the different bits of indexes together and presents it to the end user. And as they click on certain parts of the interface, other parts change appropriately depending on that particular scenario that person's phoned in about, or the challenges that you're trying to solve. So you're adding business value at the front end. You don't care where that data has come from. You don't need to know where it's come from. You don't need to know about how it's updated. That's all done for you in the background. Going on to the next row, the advanced edition of Watson Explorer. And that gives deep content mining of unstructured data. It has its own natural language processing of information. And again, it's got some tooling as well to help you. Tooling is called Content Analytics Studio, and that allows you to introduce your own rules between your different sets of data that you are interested in. Again, both the systems, the Enterprise and Advanced, can be combined together. So you could have Content Analytics Studio getting some particular data, and then that could then be indexed by the Enterprise Edition and then presented to the end user as required. But further to that, there's also now the capability to call the Watson Developer Cloud APIs, things like visual recognition or sentiment analysis. On the visual recognition, you can send an image to the service. Information about the actual image will come back, but you can also combine it with metadata that is behind the scenes of that image, say the GPS location and other information, and then again index that and then present an enriched view to the end user in your 360 view. So I've mentioned the APIs. Adam, wondering whether you could just outline what they are.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Stef. So I'm going to talk about the Watson APIs. So this is a whole bunch of cognitive APIs, which are very easy for ISVs and business partners to consume, and possibly to add some cognitive capabilities to your own applications. They're all available on IBM Bluemix, which, if you're not aware, is our cloud-based platform. It's basically a platform as a service. So the idea with Bluemix is you can bring your application and some data associated with it, upload it to Bluemix, and Bluemix provides a runtime environment to run that application. If you need to scale it up, if it becomes successful, then it's very easy to scale it out as well. But not only that, it also provides a whole bunch of services as well. So what you're looking at on the screenshot there are all the different services that Bluemix provides to the application developer. So, the idea is that the application developer can build a new and exciting application using these services much more quickly, obviously, than if they had to build everything from the ground up. So there's about 130 or so different services on Bluemix, but we're focused in right now on the Watson services. So like I say, I'm going to go through each one very, very briefly, just to give you an idea of what those services can do for you. So the first one is called the Alchemy API. And this is actually a suite of APIs that do natural language processing on text to extract like the high-level concepts and the entities and the sentiments inside of that text. And it comes with a kind of pre-trained corpus that obviously understands natural language, but you can also add your own training to this service as well. So one of the examples that you'll find out there is to do with car insurance claims. So it can understand a car insurance accident report. And the sequence of events that you might go through to get such a trained corpus is to use another piece of tooling, which is called Watson Knowledge Studio, which again is a SaaS offering. And to that tooling, you upload some documents, maybe 50 or 100 accident reports, and then you have some domain experts pull out the key entities and the relationships in that text. Of course, it's just a free text report. So the kind of things that they might be identifying are kind of what represents the make of a car, the models of cars, different types of roads, weather conditions, and types of accidents that might happen. And once that's been done for 50 or 100 or so documents, then in future, when you upload an accident report in free text, then the API gives you the capability of programmatically extracting these key entities so you can get an understanding of what that accident report is actually representing. So the next one on the list there is the Conversation API. So this is actually an API that was used to build one of the products which John was talking about, the Watson Engagement Advisor. So you have the same capability available to you as well. And it gives you the opportunity to build a kind of a conversational user interface to an application. So how it works is you go into Bluemix and you deploy an instance of the conversation service, and there's kind of a workspace associated with the application that you're building. And in that workspace, there's some tooling. Again, it's SaaS-based tooling, and using that tooling, you have to define intents, entities, and a dialogue tree. So if I relate that back to an example, one of the examples you'll find out there, one of the use cases is around a kind of car co-pilot system. So the idea being that you can communicate in a natural way by speech, for example, with your car and tell it to do certain things like turn on the lights or turn on the windscreen wipers. So in those examples, the intent would be to turn on something, and the entities would be the windscreen wipers or the lights. So you spell out all the different ways that you can say these intents and all the different ways that you could say those entities. So, I don't know, lights, side lights, main beam, whatever. And that you also define a dialogue tree. And this provides the structure around the conversation. So how it works is you write an application. So it doesn't matter what device, what channel, it could be a mobile app, a website. And that application is calling the Watson Conversation API. And you send in what the user said, turn on the lights, and the dialogue tree tells the application what it should say next. So if you said turn on the radio, it might obviously recognize that the intent was to turn on and the entity was the radio, but the dialogue tree might determine that more information is required. So it might say back to the application, well, now you need to prompt with what kind of music do you want? Do you want pop or jazz? So then you would prompt that and collect additional information. Alternatively, if the user said, turn on the radio and play some jazz, and obviously you've got everything you need in one go, and then the dialogue tree would tell the application to initiate a certain activity, like turn on the radio. The next one is document conversion. So in isolation, this isn't really that exciting. All it does is it converts documents from one format to another. So for example, a Word document into a JSON structure, but it's useful for feeding in that information to some of these other services. Next on the list there are language translation and language translator, one of which is deprecated, but they're basically both the same. One has just been kind of rebranded with a new pricing structure, but it gives you the opportunity to convert text from one language to another, as you might expect. And you can make some training on that as well, like with many of these services. So if there's certain words in your particular domain, maybe it's the financial domain and you've got descriptions of financial products, then perhaps some specific words in those descriptions, you might need to add a custom translation for them. There's also the natural language classifier. So again, this is kind of ties into some of the products and services that John was talking about. It's ideal for analyzing short pieces of text and classifying exactly what it is that the user wants. So for example, in the kind of help desk scenario. So you need to train it, as with many of these services. It does have a kind of natural understanding of language, but you need to train it with the kind of questions that your user is likely to ask. So for example, you could train it with lots of different ways of asking what the weather is like. So you might upload a bunch of questions, and one of them would be, what's the weather like today? And now if someone comes along with a tweet or an SMS or whatever it is, however your application works, and says, what's the weather like today? Then you know immediately what their intention is, and you can deal with that appropriately. Either send them to the call center or redirect them to the web page or read the weather, whatever it is. But it doesn't have to match exactly what you've trained it with, because it understands natural language. So if someone comes along and says, is it foggy today? Well, actually, even if you haven't trained it with that exact question, because it understands that fog is a type of weather condition, it still understands that somebody is asking about the weather, so it can classify that accordingly. The next one is personality insights. So this is really interesting. It gives you the opportunity to analyze some text, which is written by a person, so maybe a Twitter stream or their blog or a letter, for example, and give you a picture, an understanding of their characteristic and their personality. And that might be really useful for recruitment. If you're recruiting people for a job, are they the right person for the job, or admissions for a university? Or maybe for business, it potentially helps you understand your customer set or specific customers in more detail so that you can do more targeted marketing, for example. Now, the next one is called Retrieve and Rank. So this is all about getting better search results. So it's built upon a search engine called Solar, and what you do with it basically is you upload a bunch of documents that you want to search and some metadata about those documents. But crucially, you also provide what's called a ranker. Now, a ranker is created by domain experts, and it's basically consists of a bunch of questions and the most appropriate documents or search results that would answer that question. So this is ideal for the kind of scenarios where the search domain is very kind of specific and technical. So I don't know, something like maybe aerodynamics or something. If your documents are all about aerodynamics and you use a traditional kind of pattern matching search approach, you're not always going to get the most appropriate answer. But if you train it using the Retrieve and Rank service, then the questions that it's been trained with from these domain experts enables you to boost up certain documents and potentially get more accurate results. And again, like many of the other services, when you enter your search string, it doesn't have to exactly match what it's been trained with because it understands natural language. So if you search for something similar, something that has the same meaning, you can still benefit from that training. The next two are speech to text and text to speech, which kind of speak for themselves. It gives you the opportunity to convert speech into text and synthesize text into speech. And it does both of those in real time, which is pretty cool. And it's pretty clever as well. So it does use machine learning. So when it's converting your speech into text, it will obviously translate that on the fly. But if you later start talking about something and it thinks actually it's changing the confidence of a previous translation or a previous transcription that it's made, it can actually go back and change what it's previously transcribed to react and respond to what you've said in the future. There's also a service there called Tone Analyzer. So this is kind of geared to analyzing, for example, outbound communications. If you're an enterprise and you're writing out letters or blog posts or whatever, you could analyze that text and get an understanding of the kind of emotions and tone that that text is portraying. You don't want your outbound communications to be full of anger and sadness, and this is this is a good way of detecting that before it's too late. There's also trade-off analytics. So this uses a mathematical model to help you make a decision where there's lots of conflicting attributes that you're interested in. So in the business domain, it might be good for kind of financial analysis of different financial investment products, for example. But for consumers, a classic example is all about if you're potentially buying a new car. So there's lots of different makes and models, and there might be certain attributes that are very important to you. So the number of seats, the miles per gallon, the 0 to 60 time, and the price, right? So you can stuff in all those different car models, and you can use an API like this potentially to give a nice graphical user interface and give the user the opportunity to choose certain cars they're interested in and see how they compare to each other. So you might find the perfect car. It's great on all attributes, but typical is really expensive. So
Sure.
you might make a decision according to those variables. We've also got, finally, visual recognition. So this is a really interesting service. It gives you the opportunity or the capability to answer the question, what's in this image? So again, you can upload a load of image files, like in a zip file, or you can give it links to URLs if you prefer. And it can tell you what's in those images. So in terms of settings and objects, scenery, animals, it's pre-trained with lots of different classifiers to identify all sorts of different things. If it identifies people in there, it can give you a guess on their gender and their age as well. And also in beta as well, it can also recognize text inside those images, which is pretty cool. And not only that, you can also train it. So you can add your own classifiers to this service as well. So If, for example, again, you're working in the insurance industry and you need to be able to recognize pictures of cars with broken windscreens, you can upload a whole bunch of pictures of cars with broken windscreens, and optionally, you can even upload a whole load of pictures of cars without broken windscreens and say that one's a positive and one's a negative. Right. And then in future, then obviously it can recognize those images. So those are the services that you can tap into on Bluemix. Bluemix itself comes with a free trial, so you can go over to bluemix.net. You can sign up for 30 days. You get everything that you want to play with for free. Beyond the 30 days, then there is a perpetual free trial as well, which means that you can use a little bit of everything at no cost. So in terms of runtimes, it's enough for a couple of applications at all times. And in terms of APIs, like the Watson APIs, you can make a certain number of API calls per month. It's usually enough for application development and test activities. So I encourage you all to get out to bluemix.net and check out these services for yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, buddy. That's
welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so if you want to come along and avail yourselves of the awesome facilities at the IBM Hursley Innovation Centre, we have a website, www.iichursley.co.uk. We'll put that in the show notes so you can click on it and see what we're all about. In terms of demonstrating the sort of things that we've done with Cognitive already, we've had a number of really quite fun projects. In the background, you can see an orange and white ball with a smaller ball on top of it.
Very technical.
Very technical. Those of you who are into space probes will understand that. And what we did was we worked with Imperial College and wanted to do a really fun project to push the boundaries of where this technology could be used and also demonstrate that it is in fact really consumable. And what we did was we built a space probe. We were using some Raspberry Pis. In the back end, we had Watson services. We were able to use tone analyzer, image recognition, so that when we sent it up and it took photos of things it was seeing, it would recognize things like buildings and clouds, and it thought it saw a plane if you saw a certain number of images, and when it landed, it was quite near a road, and it demonstrated it could pick out the environment, which is really interesting to see. And just to the left of Adam's head, the evolution of that was the cognitive drone. And the purpose behind that was to develop an automated drone which could be deployed into areas where there's been an accident or an incident and the area is hazardous. And so rather than first responders having to walk through and expose themselves to danger, you could send in a fleet of drones that would be able to map the environment so they could determine what the danger actually is, but also more specifically be able to identify people in distress and either provide them with immediate resources. If there, for example, they were lost at sea, for example, provide them with like a dinghy or anything else that they would require, and then also relay back the exact position of the person to the first responders and go directly there, rescue and treat them, rather than spend time wandering around in the hazardous environment, which is obviously a lot quicker and better for the people in distress, and obviously a lot safer for the responders as well. So if you want to come along and explore Watson with us, that'd be fantastic. I guess what we'll do is we'll take a look at some of the questions we've got as well.
Okay.
So I have them here on my Twitter feed. So, okay. What is the difference between Watson Dev Cloud and Bluemix?
Yes, I could probably answer that. It is a bit confusing, actually. So Watson Developer Cloud is where the Watson APIs are hosted, but the only way that you can actually provision them at the moment is via Bluemix. So that's where you set them up, you choose which ones you want to use, and potentially at the end of the day, that's where you'd get billed for those particular APIs. So who knows, that might change in the future. Maybe you'll find those Watson Developer Cloud services available on some other clouds, but at the moment, you go to Bluemix to use them.
Fantastic. And two questions are quite similar. Can you point me to some hands-on tutorials on Watson, and are there any Watson developer samples that I can play with? The answer to the question is yes, there are. I'd be glad to know, and we'll provide links to those in the notes as well. But there are there's a great tutorial actually by Udemy on Watson Tone Analyzer, which is really consumable and nice to use. Quick run through and lets you get hands-on with coding. I recommend that. We've got a lot of really awesome developer-focused videos for you to flow through. Great articles on to follow to code up your own applications, and also as well, we have got a number of videos around not just Watson APIs, but also on WEX. And that's something that we're seeing an awful lot of interest in. And that's something that we can offer here in the IBM Hursley Innovation Centre if you want to come along and play with it. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much for the questions. And again, if you want to get in contact with us, www.iichursley.co.uk. I'll put it in the notes. And thank you so much for joining us. Take care and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.